Welcome to Good Sex at NYU, a podcast about sex, relationships, health, and mental health in a sex-positive space. So if you're looking for sometimes serious, sometimes funny, and always sex-positive discussions, then you're in the right place. I'm Danielle Elliman, Associate Director of Sexual and Relationship Respect Services at Counseling and Wellness Services. I use she, her pronouns.
And I am April Fellers, a nurse and sexual health educator at the Student Health Center. I also use she, her pronouns. We are two white, cisgender, heterosexual, female-identifying clinicians, one with a medical background and the other with mental health experience, who seek to create a space that is inclusive of all identities, backgrounds, and perspectives. Today on Good Sex at NYU, we are joined by Guilietta Molinar, Student Life Assistant in the Office of Student Life at NYU Florence. Giulietta was born in the north of Italy, but grew up close to the Cordillera in Chile, where she completed her bachelor's in educational psychology. After completing her degree, she decided to move back to Italy to learn the language and immerse herself in the Italian culture. She pursued a master's in counseling and sex education and became a sexologist, working as a sexual therapist and educator. She had a variety of different experiences in the educational area before discovering the study abroad world and joining the NYU Florence team. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for being
here.
Thank
you for having me. Yes.
Can you tell us just one thing that you love about being part of the NYU community?
So what I love the most is people. I feel like the community at NYU is very diverse. Like staff is super diverse, it's very international, and with students it's the same. And not only about backgrounds, but about also like interests and what they want to do, what they want to study, which means that then we have like a lot of activities, very different activities, a lot of different courses and experiences. So I think it like enriches a lot the experience. And then I have a lot of fun. So I think that's one of my favorite parts. Like I really enjoy it. I feel like I'm learning a lot. So it's been an amazing experience.
Oh, that's great. Wonderful. Can you tell us more about what your role is at NYU Florence and how students get connected to services during their time in Florence?
Yeah, so I'm a student life assistant, which means that I work inside the Office of Student Life, and I'm specifically working inside programming. So I have some things that I do also with other colleagues, like being there for activities, I staff activities, trips, some other events that happen during the semester, like orientation. We help the students to understand how the public transport works, so like the housing orientation the first week, and then like supporting them during the semester in any problems or issues or things that they might need help or support during the semester that it's not like academic related. So we do the other part. And then as I'm working in programming with another colleague, with Benedicta, we take care of organizing all the events and like supporting students that want to organize the events, then also with the trips and with orientation, farewell parties, so like all that means programming.
Sounds like a fun job. Yeah.
It is. We never stop.
Yeah, a lot of work.
But I also get to go on trips and enjoy and spend a lot of time with the students.
Yeah.
So that's like my favorite part. That's nice. You get to meet them.
Yeah, That's great. And so can you tell us a little bit more about what campus life is like when someone comes to NYU Florence?
So the campus is very Italian. The campus is like a very big campus with different villas spread around this like field of ulivi. So I know like I'm describing it and it sounds like an Italian movie, but I remember the first time I went to campus and I was like loving it already. Like my Roman Empire, I swear, was amazing. So it's like a very chill life for students, I feel, and also for us as staff, because you get in there, you have to walk from one villa to another, which can be sometimes like 15 minutes under the sun. So sometimes you appreciate it, sometimes you appreciate a bit less. But also it's nice because you're like in the middle of the nature. It's not that you're in the middle of the city center, which of course it's also lovely, but you're a bit apart from the city center, and you have like these panoramic views of the city, and then like you find students on the grass, like studying or having a picnic, on them like other ones, I don't know, under some of the trees, like having a conversation. Like it's a spread campus. It's not like, at least what we are a bit used to here in Florence. It's not like inside a building.
Mm.
So it's very Italian.
That sounds lovely and a little bit different than what you get here in New York. Like the students have Washington Square Park, but really it's inside of a lot of buildings. It's kind of spread out. It's very metropolitan. I think in my head I was thinking that, you know, it was probably also in the middle of Florence, the city. So I'm glad that you shared.
Well, it's not far. Like maybe walking, it's like 25 minutes apart from right the middle of the city center. So sometimes, you know, you maybe you're living on campus like some of the freshmen or other upper class students, and they're like, oh no, I have to go to the city and walk. But also, it's not that far either. The only thing is that Florence is not a big city, so like you just get a bit confused with like the distances. You feel like it's far, but then when you think about it, maybe in New York you used to do like an hour to get to class.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I'd say I feel like if there's students coming from New York to Florence, I don't think that 25 minutes would seem like that long, because people kind of walk everywhere around New York. But I've heard that Florence is very beautiful and would love to visit someday.
We'll wait for you.
I was in Florence, Italy 2 years ago and regret not going to the NYU campus. So gotta go back. I know.
Yeah, come. And the gardens, we have some amazing gardens. So beautiful. No, you have to come back then.
Yeah.
It's a good reason to go back.
Yeah. Can you tell us?
You will have to.
Can you tell us what maybe some of the cultural adjustments might be for students coming to study in Florence?
So of course, I think it depends on from which site are you coming. But from New York, for example, one of the things is that in Florence, there's like a slower life. So like, which means that, for example, public transport, sometimes it doesn't work that well, which means that you might be moving, walking, and like people grab bikes and this kind of stuff. It's like a very walkable city. It's a smaller city. So it's like, you get maybe that peace, even if sometimes it's very crowded in the city center, because it's also like a beautiful city. We have a lot of tourists coming, but it's like a different lifestyle, I feel. I'm from Chile, so I was used to the Chilean lifestyle, which is, I feel like very similar to the American one. And I really noticed a lot like the difference when I arrived to Italy, because it's like, okay, yes, people goes to work and everything, but then after work, you will see them like hanging out in the park, or like going to have a drink with some friends, or grabbing coffee, or going to the movies. Like also during the week, you see a lot of movement and a lot of people like hanging out. While I feel like in Chile, and maybe it's a bit the same in the US, maybe not in all the cities, but in some of them, that you just go to work from Monday to Friday, and like that's it. And then maybe, okay, on weekends you get some time for yourself, and that's it. And it's very focused on work and college and like studying. While here, I feel it's a bit more chill. Like, yes, of course you work and you do extra hours if you have to, and if you have homework, like you stay on campus and you study. But then there's a lot of things to do outside that, and Italians are very used to do it. So like the culture takes you to do that, and I think we enjoy. I like, from the moment I got to Italy, I feel like I have more time in my life during weeks, like weekdays. I don't know if I
so just a little slower pace. I think in New York specifically, if students have been here, it's a bit faster pace. There's a lot to do, but it's like you're packing your agenda, and there's no like, you know, slowing down at all. But it feels like to me what you're saying, there's a little bit slower pace, even though there's still lots to do, and, you know, lots of things.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
You still have like a lot of things to do and to visit, but it's still like slower. Like if you want to have maybe, like I've talked to some students and they would be like, oh, I wanted a break from New York, so I came here and like I'm enjoying myself. So it's like they see it a bit like that.
Yeah. What about students from Abu Dhabi or Shanghai? Have you noticed any cultural change, like differences that they would need to keep in mind?
Well, they all say the same, more or less. Like it's a small city, so they appreciate because they all mostly come from big cities and like from big sites. So you get to Florence, you have this campus, you have like all like the dorm that is not far from the campus and from the classes. Like they also enjoy that also because it's gives you also like the sense of community. Like they get here, it's all like in the campus, and you have like a lot of places to hang out with the other ones. So it's like it's I had I spent some time with the Abu Dhabi students during the summer too. Like we went off for summer programs, and they were all saying that, and we're also like the weather, like it was like, oh, this is so hot, and this kind of stuff. And well, the other cultural difference that I see, and like all students notice from all the sides almost, is that coming to Italy, you find a lot of like older things. So like the spaces are smaller. Like if you go to a kitchen would be smaller. Like the fridge, it doesn't have like 2 doors but one. Like the freezers are smaller, the same with the washing machine, like this kind of stuff, because it's an older country. Like it's an old country. The apartments and buildings are beautiful, but then it also means that like that the streets are very narrow. So maybe if you want to ride a bike, you have to find the streets that have like the bicycle street. I can't think of the name right now. So you have also that, like there's less space, like less private space, I'd say. Like everything is a bit smaller. And that all students notice it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And are there some common challenges that you see students experiencing when they move to Florence? I mean, aside from maybe like the smaller spaces and the smaller fridges and the bike lanes that they're missing?
Well, at the beginning of this semester was probably reaching campus, because some of them are used to walk, some of them aren't, but then at the end they appreciate it. And then I'd say that Italian culture is very traditional, and we have like a lot of old generations. Like younger generations are a bit more open-minded, but still we have like a lot of old generations still like around, of course. And this means that like the culture in general, it's a bit traditional and close, and it's very linked to the Catholicism. So that also it's a bit difficult to crack. Like engage with the locals can be a bit challenging. And fortunately, like NYU Florence has a lot of programs. We have like community engagement programs that promote like students getting involved with the community and with locals. So like we try to push in this way and like try to support students in doing that, because many of them come here, they want to learn Italian, they want to get in contact with the local culture, like learn from the culture and from the people, and that's amazing. So like NYU Florence, we try like to organize events together with other universities, with other associations. There are like many collaborative experiences that we try to offer to students during the semester. Because without those, like arriving to an international city as Florence is right now, because we have many university programs, like college programs from abroad, it's a bit difficult because locals are a bit close-minded, but also like just too close to difference, like different things, if you know what I mean. So I've seen this as a big challenge for students.
Yeah.
But that can be overcome. Like they do, and they participate in these initiatives, and then you see them at the end of the semester that like they made friends, or they are going to play in soccer like with Florentine students, or that they met like other professors in the schools they were teaching students and like helping. So it's great.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be challenging for locals to want to maybe allow all these students in because they're just going to leave shortly. I mean, I know that there's social media and there's like excitement about potentially staying in touch, you know, and being able to visit someone, but just saying, I can understand like a local's perspective. Oh, you don't really necessarily want to let these, you know, folks in. They're only here for a couple months. But it's nice to hear that like they do end up like making some connections locally as well as with other universities that are there.
Yeah, well, then you find a lot of Italians that really want to get in contact with other cultures and like to practice their Italian or their English or like this kind of stuff. We have done them sessions that the Office of Academic Support organizes. So like then the students from the NYU Florence get in touch with the students from the college in Italy, like in Florence, and that's amazing too. So you see, but I feel like this you would say it in like maybe younger generations. Than older ones.
Yeah. Well, that kind of is a great segue. And tell us about the dating and sexual culture in Florence.
It's very interesting. So we have a very international environment. So it depends really, like you can find a bit of everything. So what we want to talk about, like dating Italians, like in Italy.
Yeah.
So here in Italy, we have the aperitivo, which is a very famous concept. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's like when you go for a drink and you get something to eat, and like this happens mostly after you finish classes, like around 6, 7, so also after office, let's say. And that would be like a standard date in Italy. So it's great because it's in a public space. It's great because even if you get something to drink that could be alcoholic or not, like that's of course up to you. But even if it's something with alcohol, you get something to eat. So it's like the whole package. And it's like an hour, 30 minutes, 2 hours, and it can be as long as you want or as short if you want to leave before, But this is like the standard date, I'd say, at least the first one. And I think it's like kind of safe in a way, like considering that there are many kind of dates that you can have. I don't know if you know what I mean. So you have these, and then, well, a big thing for Italians is the nonverbal communication. So I know this can be a challenge when you're not Italian, because like Italians base a lot of their own communication and like their own speeches and like conversation in using their hands or like the body, like in different ways. And there are some cultures that are not as used as Italians to use like the nonverbal communication. So it can be misleading and confusing. And this is something that we actually talk about quite a lot to our students during orientation. Just to be clear, because maybe, for example, in South America, at least, we are like very warm and like very physical, like we hug and we kiss when we say like hello, etc. But also like we are very verbal, like we would say everything out loud. In Italy, like there are some things that you like just you do a gesture and that's the phrase,
Do you have an example? I'm curious. Do you have an example of like a gesture that they might do that would mean something?
Yeah, well, for example, like this one means leave.
Okay. So it's like
someone could look at you.
Like yes.
Well, I'm not Italian, but I've learned some of them.
No,
so
I'm
like
just
if
curious.
you're on a fan, they are like, oh well, this is crowded, and this is like, okay, let's leave.
Okay.
It's like a way to communicate to your friends. Like if it's too noisy and you're kind of like you make that gesture, then signals everybody will just meet outside and leave and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
But it can be very tricky because if you don't know this, like with these, they said what they had to say, and you're like, what happened? And maybe you see them leaving, and you're like, what?
Yeah. Absolutely. I would be confused. I'd be like, what's wrong with your hands that you're like putting them together like that? I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to like ridicule another culture, but I would just be really confused. So it's good that you have
because
a session about
it's
this.
something that you have to learn, and there are like millions. I always discover new ones, and I've been living in Italy for 5 years now. Like there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
So it's great because it's like another part of the culture, and like I was super curious when I got here in Italy, and I wanted like, okay, show me all of them, teach me them. Like I want to know them and I want to use them. Then you have to understand like how fast you have to do it, or like the arms, or like the context and everything. But it can be very confusing.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It sounds like again, I'm not trying to make fun of it, but it sounds like baseball signs.
That's what I was thinking.
And so you're like trying, and it's almost like for locals only, right? So it's So like they're in the know, but tourists don't kind of pick up on what people are saying.
I don't know what bases. What? Give me an example. I have no idea.
Well,
I have no idea.
Yeah, like in baseball, like they might signal for someone to steal a base, or they might signal a certain type of pitch that they want to do, right? I'm not even like super into baseball. But
it's like specific to each team, right? Yeah. So that like the other team doesn't know what your like signals are.
Secretly signing what you want to do with the next play, kind of a thing.
That's great. Well, it's something like that, but wider.
Yeah. That's
the country.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of some of the things I think about when I think about maybe European, but also like Italian dating, and I'm wondering if they're like misconceptions, because I feel like I've had some students come to me and say, oh, well, you know, like Europeans and like Italians are more like open, and they say I love you sooner. I'm wondering, like, are these like misconceptions, or like how do you feel that, you know, it is in the local community? Like, do you feel like they
That's
are
tricky.
Is it tricky? Okay. I'm just thinking of like misconceptions, if you can share like some misconceptions that, you know, students might encounter when they're coming into Italy.
Yeah, no, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, you didn't. I just was finishing that, like, it was, what kind of misconceptions are there, or there are some, you know, true things that are happening?
So from my personal experience, I arrived here to Italy saying, oh, well, Italy is part of Europe, so like probably they are super ahead with sex education, and they're super open-minded, and no, not like that. They're very conservative, like even younger generations. It's something that is changing, like in many other parts of the world, but it's like a slow change. Mm-hmm. So I'd say they're very conservative. There's this like, there's not a lot of sex education here, and it's very taboo. So people will not talk about it. Like not even in the group of friends, or not even inside a couple. Like of course there are always exceptions. I'm not talking about everyone, but it's not like an open thing. Like I have some British friends, for example, and they would tell me that in England you would test for STIs, like a super normal common thing, and here in Italy it's very taboo. Like in London you have centers in which you can go and test, and it's like super chill, and they wouldn't be looking at you like almost judging you, and you would find people from like any age and any ethnies and everything. While here in Italy it's still like a thing that it's not that easy to do. It's not an easy thing to perform, like the STIs test. Like you have to go to one doctor, then to another, then you have like this bureaucracy. It's still difficult, but because it's nothing common, you know. Like, yeah, well, we have vending machines with like condoms on the streets, so that's great, because maybe you don't find like an open pharmacy. But then I don't like, but it still is a taboo and a stigma. So it's not as open-minded as I thought, even if we're in Europe. Then I would say, and I hope I don't get Italians getting angry with me, but I'd say that up north, they are more open than in the south. There's like also this difference. Well, it's basically like two different cultures in one country. Like you might find a lot of differences between the north and the south. And the north normally it's a bit more open.
Okay.
And these kind of topics, while in the south they're more like, okay, so you get married and you have a family, and then like maybe the man works and the women stay at home, and like this kind of stuff, which also like you might find, you might not find, but like in general it's more like that.
Yeah. So how do you have conversations with students about specifically about dating or safe sex at the Florence campus? And, you know, we spend a lot of time in New York trying to educate and encourage students to get STI testing and to be on PrEP to prevent HIV if they are engaging in risky sexual behavior. Like those kinds of things is very common in at NYU specifically. And so I'm curious kind of what those conversations look like for students coming to Florence, and if there is any education about like where to go for STI testing, since it seems pretty complicated. Like kind of what would you share with students on how they could get connected to those services?
So during, I have so much information in my mind right now. So during orientation, we let students know lots of stuff. So for example, we have an on-campus nurse, Francesca, which is great. And like students can go and get tested with her, and she would just send like the samples to the laboratory and then like get the results. So that's great. So not only for STIs, but any medical issue, they can go with her. She's on campus like from Monday to Friday. We also have a doctor coming once a week for other things like further information or visits. So like on campus, we have that research, which is very valuable and important. And then we have 2 counselors that they can get in contact with. We have a counselor on site that goes with Thiago, which is amazing too. And he works also from 9 to 5 or 9 to 6. So every day on campus, and students can go with them. They can like book an appointment. So it's great. And then we have also another counselor, Silvia, that works online. So like these are one of the first resources that we give to students. Mm-hmm. And like for confidentiality and like health related issues or questions or information, they go to them. Like absolutely, and they know it, and like we spread this information everywhere, so they have it. And regarding sexual education, we did the sexual health week. Awesome. That was a success. It was amazing because it's not easy to talk to students about these topics either. Like because we are not like, well, I'm used to talk about it a bit because I studied it like for years, and like I think it's a lot of practice. So only the fact to start talking about it, or like even putting posters around campus with something that says Sexual Health Week, I believe only that encourages them to say, okay, so it's something that we could talk about it. So maybe it's normal because we find it like everywhere. And with these different, we did these different events. We did one with Francesca in which we were talking about the STIs and eating pizza. So maybe not the best combo, but it was really nice. So she was explaining all the STIs and like what were the differences and like the consequences or not, how to prevent, which kind of test you should be doing, and like this kind of stuff. Then we talked about contraceptives, condoms, female condoms, dental dams. So like all these topics, like we were talking about it with a small group of students. So it was great because it was like a safe space in which they were asking questions, like a lot of questions. It went like for 2.5 hours, the session. So that was great.
Yeah.
So we're trying to do these initiatives. I also like it's like my personal mission in life, basically. So I will always try to create initiatives like in this way, and I think it's really important also like for college students. You get there, you're living alone, you have like more freedom than you had before probably, so like it's great and enjoy it, but just do it in a safe way. And that's like we're trying to push, like they can get condoms around campus, we have them there, like whenever we have like problem because some policy was broken and it's like related, it's like sex related or like this kind of relation related, we always are super open. We meet with the students, like privacy, and like talk them. It's never, we don't see it as a bad thing either, talking about it, and like anything that could be related to. Then we have like clubs, so we have the queer club, and then they have also that community, and we show that we're super open, like for everyone and to everyone. So I believe that's great for them too.
Yeah. And are you doing this once a semester, this kind of sexual health week, or how often are you doing those?
Let's see. So I've been working since January at NYU, so this was the first time. Hopefully we will be repeating it. It was very successful, and we got to engage some of the student leaders as well to help us, which was great too. So we'll see.
Yeah, sounds like something we should model. Like you all started and then we like spread it to all of the campuses. That sounds like a great.
I'd be glad to. Like I have all the information. We did this trivia. The students, like I started with 5 students and I was like, well, okay, that's fine. Like sex education is not an easy topic, so I'm fine. And then at the end we were like 20.
That's great.
Because the students were like walking by and seeing us like laughing and talking, and they would just come. I was like, okay, join one of the teams, get a buster.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. It was great.
I think it also helps that you have like a smaller, campus community where it's a little bit easier, hopefully, to connect and to, know where to go. I think sometimes there's challenges, on NYU main campus here in New York City, because there's, the city to compete with and so many other things to compete with. But I definitely think it's worth, doing on everyone's campus to make sure to highlight the services that are there. But one of the things that you've mentioned a couple of times now is like your passion for this. And I noticed that in your bio, you have, your master's in counseling and sex ed, but also, you became a sexologist. I'm wondering if you can share with folks a little bit more about, your work there and, perhaps even like what sexologist means as it relates to like how you became passionate about this particular topic.
Okay, so I arrived to sexology because as you said at the beginning, I did educational psychology. So like I have my passion for education first. And then because I wanted to come to Italy, I was like thinking about what I wanted to like study deeper in like my professional path. And I realized like over the years, because I did some research during university, like with the trans community, or then I had like some very like close cases in my personal life of people from the community, or like sex abuse or this kind of stuff, that made me realize that there was like a very big empty space in education about sexual education and affective education. So I started reading more about it. Then I found this master's in Italy. So I was like, okay, great. I get to study what I like and also go to Italy. So it was a bit of an excuse. And then when I was doing the master, I really liked it. It opened a world to me, because then I was like, okay, sex education is super specific, so I'm fine. Then I actually realized that there are like a lot of subtopics inside sex education. But I arrived there because I believe it's very important. I believe we don't talk about it, and it's a normal part of us. So, and we don't give, sometimes like people, like society doesn't give it the importance it has. And many times it's misused, like for marketing or like social media, while actually it's like a very positive thing if used like correctly and wisely and like with information. So I made it like my personal mission to spread the information that I had. And then I started also doing consulence. So I also do like therapy. And basically what a sexologist does is I help you with any problems or difficulties or challenges that you have like related to your sexual health and life. But the thing is that normally people think about like, oh, people that don't reach an orgasm, which is also like an orgasmia. I don't know the words in English, so I'm sorry for this.
Yeah, that's absolutely the right word.
Okay, great, good. So like, yes, this, but also like maybe a couple that is having problems like in intimacy or like in the relationship in general. Maybe there's like a communication problem. So we talk about that too. Or maybe you are like having doubts, or you don't know about like your sexual orientation and you're exploring yourself, and you are like having maybe guilt because you're exploring this path, which is absolutely normal and like part of our life and part of like self-discovering. And then because of society or religion or like family or peers, you have like all these doubts or like guilt. So you come and we talk about it. And I've realized that yes, there are like, it can be biological as well. But when people, because sexologists, like we're not that many, which is not great. And if someone arrives to me, it's because they've already done all the other things they thought that could help. So it's very difficult that someone gets to me to ask me for having a session and they didn't go to a doctor first. So when they get to me, I ask, like, did you go to a gynecologist or like to an andrologist, right? In English, I don't know how it's called.
Urologist, I think. Anyway, go on.
Okay. we'll say that's the word. So like to go and check if everything is okay, like anatomically, organically, and they normally say, yes, I did, and that's fine. So then like you realize, okay, so let's see what's going on. And I realized that mostly is like lack of education and information. So thinking that things are weird when actually they're common. But the problem is that no one talks about it, and you never got to talk about it like with your parents or with your siblings or with your friends. So you always thought it only happened to you, but actually it's normal. Or maybe you have like crazy parameters, like because you have watched porn and that's like your only point of reference, or you went to look for information on the internet and it's like crazy because that's unreal. Or many times it's also a problem of communication when it comes to couples, because like people don't talk about sex, not even when you're having it with the other person.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot.
Like, which is,
I feel like you're summarizing our podcast. Like the whole reason why we have it is because of all the things that you're saying. I'm like, yes, preach.
yes. But that's it. And like sometimes like, okay, have you talked with your partner? They're like, oh no. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, okay, so let's do something. And like after the first session, the first homework will be like, you go and you talk with your partner and you tell this how you feel, and then like let's say what they say. And sometimes it was like as simple as that.
Yeah. It's so interesting as you're talking, I'm realizing like people feel more comfortable coming to talk to you, a complete stranger, than they are talking to their partner, which I mean there's some like there's no risk, I guess, in talking to you, whereas there is always risk in talking.
Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, awkwardness. Like we don't want to have awkward conversations. And April and I say constantly, I'd rather have an awkward conversation than bad sex.
And always like, I love the first sessions with patients because it's very funny. I'm super like informal in my way of talking, like as I'm talking to you right now, like I'm like that because that's my approach and my personality first, but also like sex is already like a taboo. So if I'm super formal and like I'm like talking like super correctly, it makes you feel even more uncomfortable. So like on the first session, I'm always like, okay, I'll call them things for their name, and I'm gonna be asking like very uncomfortable questions and a lot of details. And of course, if you don't feel uncomfortable, you just can say, I want to skip this question, or let's go back to that like in the future, and that's absolutely okay. But like that's my way, and if you're here, it's because and the normal will say, yeah, okay, like. Maybe I'm gonna blush, but like I'm gonna answer it. And then by the third time I'm seeing them, they're like super freely talking about it and seeing that change only because you were talking about it,
Yeah.
That's great.
Do you, it sounds like this is separate from your role at NYU. Are these conversations you'd be willing to have with students, or like you would see them like in a session outside of the university? Like if somebody listening wanted to come and talk to you about some of these things, how would you go about that?
So my role at NYU, it's another thing. I'm not a sexologist like full time because I think I would get bored. I love my job at NYU because it's very dynamic and I have some patients during the evenings, but I do it like with people that speaks in Spanish because I think it's great like to maintain that part of myself like in Spanish. I have a bit of Spanish, speak English, Italian, so and in these kind of cases, if students feel like they are having difficulties in this area, I would just recommend them to go to Francesca, who always who knows a lot about it too. And like I know that students go and talk her about it. It's confidential, so that's great because my role in NYU is not confidential. It's private, of course, but it's not confidential because that's not like the role I'm having there. And then you have like counselors. So I would recommend them to going to Ortiago or Silvia or Francesca, which are amazing resources. They're also super open-minded and they know about it. I'm always there like for having a conversation with them and supporting them. And then during the sexual health week, they would come to me with questions and I'm happy to answer them. But also that's not why I'm working at NYU. That's like the health role and I'm out of it, which I enjoy. Sometimes I'm like, oh, well, I would like that too. But I made my choice.
And do you have any tips for students who are dating and thinking about, having sex while they're, studying away and getting more freedom while they're in Florence?
And just be safe. I will never tell you don't have sex or don't date or don't go out with people, because I think it's part of life, and being abroad and getting to know also that part of the culture is very interesting. Maybe you're coming from Shanghai, have you only dated people from that city, then you come to another city and it's getting to know another part of the culture. So I think that's great, and I personally suggest it. But always being safe. So if you're going to be using the apps, please be super careful and don't send nudes or don't send your position, your address before even meeting someone. For the first dates, always go to a public place. Florence is a beautiful city. And the other sides around the world that NYU has are always in beautiful cities. Yes. So just go to a nice park, go to a nice square, take the chance to also get to know a new place while meeting another person. And that's great. And you're in a public place with people around you. So you're safe and you're getting to know someone, and that's great. So do it safely. Your friends where you are, send your position, share your location. I know many students have their location shared continually, infinitely with their other friends. And I think that's great.
And those are all protective factors that don't necessarily prevent harm from happening, but they can make you feel safer. So what are the ways in which you specifically are going to feel safe in this environment? And that goes for, Florence or for New York City. Any place can really relate to, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And ultimately, if someone's going to cause you harm, whether it's here or, in Florence, they're going to do it even if you take those measures.
Yeah, so it's just do what you can do from your side. Then what happens? It's life. Anything could happen, good or bad. But Florence, it's a safe city. It's a small city. You will always be gonna be walking with people around you. As any city, of course, there are places that it's better to avoid at a certain times. But it's safe. You can go to have a date in the middle of the city center, and it's going to be crowded and there's going to be people and it's going to be beautiful. So explore, go around, meet people. I think that's great. You might date someone that then becomes your friend, or a couple, and you go with your friend and you meet two friends and then you have a new group of friends. So I think that's great. I think there's nothing bad with it. And of course, use protection. Here in Italy, the STIs are not the testing for it. It's not a big deal. So that's another thing I would suggest to people coming to Italy, just to take that into consideration, because it's not only about potentially getting pregnant, but also about the STIs, which is a big thing. So just to be to protect about it, because here people don't go, they don't get tested. Gotcha. It's not unusual stuff. Or of course, they do, but it's not a big thing here. And it's not even easy to do it in practice. For our students, yes, because they just go to the nurse and you can do it. But for the rest of the population.
Yeah, that's good to keep in mind. Yeah. What about if somebody were to experience sexual or relationship harm while studying away in Florence? What kind of resources or support services are available for them?
Okay, so we always have a staff member on call. So students have a number that they can reach out 24/7, and someone will always answer that call. So the first thing that we tell them is that if you find yourself in a risky situation or in an unsafe situation, you call us. So this kind of situation, we expect the students to trust on us and call us. And then depending on what happened, what are the next steps? But we always have the nurse that we can call 24/7. We have Tiago on the counselor, and that we can call 24/7 and they can move if it's needed. Then here in Florence, there's this procedure that the hospital have to act for these specific cases of violence. So if you suffer any violence, even sexual violence, you would get to the hospital and they would activate this procedure, which is great because you would get the doctors to know about it, so they hopefully will be more sensitive about it. And then like they have to follow like these specific tests to like do and perform and what to get see or not. Then what you can report to the police if it's needed. And from OSL, we're always going to be supporting you like step by step. You have them follow up with a counselor, you have follow up with a nurse, with a doctor if needed. So like we try to prevent, we give them all the tips, and then if luckily unluckily it happens, of course we are there and supporting each every step.
Yeah. And so someone would go with a student to the hospital if they needed, because I'm thinking like if I were to go to a hospital when I was traveling, it'd be a little overwhelming. Even if I spoke the language, I might revert back to not being able to speak.
We always go with them. Like for anything, if they have to go to the first aid or the hospital, we're always someone from OSL is always going with them.
Okay.
Like I've been to the hospital with students many times. And if we have to wait 5-6 hours with them, we do, because we know it's a very stressful situation. Like other than the fact that you probably are feeling very bad because if you're at the hospital, it's because you're not at your best.
Yeah.
Then it's very stressful because you find like you're in a system that you don't know how it works.
Yeah.
So like we're always accompanying students to the hospital, and if they have medical visits and they want someone to come accompany them, like we also do that.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. One thing that came up just in my head just now is perhaps the difference between in the US, we have like an age of drinking that's 21. And I'm wondering like the drinking culture that might or might not be in Florence and Italy, like, and how that sort of compares and how students might need to like think about that as well.
Yeah, well, that's a big thing because here in Italy, the legal age for drinking is 18. And alcohol, I believe, at least, it's a big part of the culture, but not because Italians are getting drunk, but because it's actually inside their culture. As the food, there's the drinking, and like you have wine and you have prosecco. Here, they normally, like if you go to a club, yes, you would have like hard alcohols, but other than that, you would see people in bars like having an Aperol Spritz or like a glass of wine or a beer. So it's like this kind of drinking culture, always with the aperitivo, the thing that I was saying like at the beginning. You always get something to drink that comes with something to eat. So all the thing that not drinking on an empty stomach. And then, for example, shots are not a big thing here. So if you find a bar in which they're selling shots, probably it's like foreign oriented, because like Italian. So there's like this drinking culture that exists and is very big, but also I grew up with a culture that is very similar to the one in the US. So like people would start drinking like super young and getting drunk super young. And like I had several like close cases in which they would finish in the hospital because of this. And then when I arrived here, I saw they have like a very different approach. So I think it's great if the students can spend some night time, like to explore the nightlife that Italians have, because it's not that it doesn't include alcohol, because they do, like there is it's there, but it's a very different approach because they would just drink to like as a social thing, like because they are enjoying it and not to get drunk. And I remember, this is a very personal experience, but I remember one of my first years here in Florence, I was like 24 years old. And basically I was like hanging with my friends, like in an apartment, we were drinking, and I was like, okay, let's play a game. We're like, okay, what game? And I was like, well, give me some cards and we can do like a drinking game. And they were all like looking at me like, why would we need to play a game to drink? Like, why would we do that? And I was super used to that because in Chile, we have like a lot of drinking games, and I know that in the US too. And here was like, we don't need to have a game to drink. Like we can talk or we can play like a board game, but why would you play a drinking game, like to get drunk and be forced to drink and like force the other ones to drink? And I remember that was like mind-blowing for me. It was like, you are absolutely right. But it was just, for me, it was super common. And then I think it's a good example to understand like the big difference in in these cultures,
Yeah. And that's a great example.
Yeah. And I'm glad
I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. I'm glad we talked about it because I think that sometimes alcohol and, sexual and dating harm are often seen in, relationship to each other. I don't think that alcohol causes those things, but I do think that they can be a risk factor. And so I know that like when you think about college students who are used to like the age of, drinking here in the US being 21 and then they go abroad and it's 18. And so maybe they're not quite familiar with their limits yet. And they can be exploring that as well because they have more access, because they can now access it. And so that can lead to testing their own boundaries. And maybe there are, limits that they go over at times. And so just sort of wanting to name that in this conversation as well, that because there's difference in laws, that can just have an impact on a student's experience and journey when they're abroad.
I think it's absolutely part of their experience while they are here. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because of course you arrive to a country, like mostly the freshmen, because you arrive to a country in which it's legal to drink. And of course, like I would do the same. Like I would just go drinking the next day just for the new experience of going to a bar and don't get your ID asked. So I understand, but I also think it's a great opportunity for them to get to know their limits and learn how to drink in a responsible way, because it's fine, and in a safe way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because it's you can do that and explore. I think it's part of growing also. And if you have this study abroad experience, you're probably gonna be going out more and meeting a lot of friends, and social spaces are mostly in bars, restaurants. Here in Italy, if you get together with your friends, you're mostly gonna be going to a bar or to a restaurant. Mm-hmm. So it's there, and it's part of the experience, and that's great. But just use it as a moment to get experience and understand your limits and grow, but not in a safe way.
Yeah, yeah. And if you have any questions about that, you have resources and people on campus that you can talk to. Like you've mentioned the counselors, you talked about the Student Health Center. Are there other folks at the NYU Florence campus that students should be aware of? Anyone that you would recommend that they know?
Well, I would recommend everyone. I think we have a lot. We are a big campus with a lot of staff. And it's very funny because we're all divided in villas, but it's the people in the office of Student Life, probably they're gonna be meeting all of us because we are involved in the orientation week. Mm-hmm. So we are the faces that they will see when they just arrive. But then you have the people in the Office of Academic Support, which are there to support you, not only for academics, if you have any other kind of problem and you're there, they're going to be happy to help. Then we have Villa La Pietra, in which we have the administrative staff and directors and the museum. And then if you go there and you're interested in museums or art, people there would be so thrilled to talk with you about it. Then we have another villa, Sassetti, in which we have the international conference room, and we have staff there from academics and also from event planning. And they love being in contact with the students as well. They enjoy it because they plan the events and they see the students coming. And if they don't have maybe that many chances to see them as we do at OSL or the academics office. So I believe they should be exploring the whole campus.
Yeah.
And then at the end, we all meet in the same place because we're all having lunch at the cafeteria. So that's another instance.
That's nice that there's even though it's kind of spread out, that there's that one centralized location that everybody can commingle and see people.
Yeah, when we have events, we try to pop into all the events. If there's an event in the academics office, I would try to go and say hi and see how it's going, and the other way around. So we just try to make community. That's also part of it.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Anything?
Go ahead.
Is there anything else about the Florence campus that you want to either shout out or think that students coming there for the first time should know?
I think the gardens. I remember last semester, at the end of the semester, I was talking with some students and they told me they never visited the gardens. And for me, it was crazy because I believe it's the most beautiful part of everything is beautiful. I couldn't choose my favorite part. but they are amazing and they are open for students to go. We have had alumni coming back to do like the marriage proposals in the gardens with like the cameraman and stuff. Yeah, no, they're really, really beautiful. So I'd say that. And then like to explore all the villas. We have museum tours on like the villa that is like a house museum. We have tours like almost every week. Now that are gonna be doing by students, by some of our student leaders. So like take the advantage of seeing because it has a lot to offer the campus itself. And sometimes you're very worried to explore the city, but then you miss what you have like next to you.
Yeah.
So do both.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a really great conversation, and we will definitely encourage everyone to take their semester abroad in Florence. That sounds gorgeous.
Well, come. Yeah, I'll be waiting for you too.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right.
Yeah. If you have questions about the podcast or anything we talked about today, please feel free to reach out to us at goodsex.podcast@nyu.edu. This email address is monitored during business hours and may take 3 to 4 days for follow-up. We are definitely open to critical and thoughtful feedback, as we didn't cover everything in this episode and might have said something that was inaccurate or that had a negative impact on someone. If you have questions about your sexual health and are an NYU student, you can connect with our Student Health Center sex expert at sexpert@nyu.edu or schedule an appointment through the Student Health Center portal. Look at our show notes for additional information and resources, including organizations, articles, books, and videos.
If you have urgent mental health concerns, safety issues, or you are worried that someone might have caused harm to you, or that you might have caused harm to someone, then you can contact NYU's Confidential Wellness Exchange at 212-443-9999. Chat with them using their mobile app or email them at wellness.exchange@nyu.edu. For anyone, NYU or non-NYU listeners, you can call the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-4673, the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233, or the National Mental Health Hotline. Simply dial 988 from anywhere in the U.S.
Thanks for listening, and tune in to our next episode where we continue to talk about good sex at NYU. Subscribe to the podcast to hear all of our quickies and interviews with NYU community members. Thanks to our content contributors for this episode, Bernadette Kerr, Alyssa LaFosse, Dr. Dominic Baini-Amisa, Zoe Raguzios, and to our health promotion team, Anna Genova, Jenny Mellum, Parade Stone, and Arna Dixit, and to Gotham Studios and Karen Ortman.